Alles klar.
Okay, hello and welcome to another installation of the Continental Cup post-coverage videos. Today we will discuss the Grixis Tempo deck by Top8 finalist Lukas, which is here with me today. Great that you're here. Nice that you found time.
Thank you for having me.
And so, Lu, this is your first appearance in a top spot of a Highlander tournament outside of the Westphalian tournament series, so let's briefly introduce you. So, since when do you play Magic?
I play Magic since Origins. That must be 2015.
Yeah, something
if I'm
like
right.
that. 14, 15, that. Something like that, yeah.
And I'm playing mostly Highlander and Modern.
All right.
Sometimes Pauper.
Great. I hope to see you on Whitsun Monday in Bielefeld for our Pauper tournament. So
of course.
be packed into somebody's car and come over, or train, or whatever. But let's talk about Highlander. So since when do you play Highlander?
Highlander I play since 2020, although as of the start of Corona.
Oh, okay. That's unusual, but your roommate is a Highlander player, which was also in the top 8. I happen to know that, so you could play a lot of Highlander during COVID, which is an unusual Highlander career, but a good one. And all the testing paid off, because you and Sebastian both finished in the top 8, so great. So I know you mainly as a Grixis player. Are there any Highlander decks that you like or that you have experience with?
I often tested any kind of control decks, but they always had a bad standing since I started with Highlander, because the mana curve started to go so low that
and if you test it against your Grixis deck, then of course the control deck probably looks bad, because control doesn't like to play against tempo decks.
Yeah. Yeah. The major decks were mainly tempo when I started Highlander, and so control wasn't in a good spot.
All right, so that kind of skips the next question, why you chose Grixis for the Continental Cup, but I think you have more or less answered this already. So
yeah,
this was the only deck that you had available and tested. And yeah, but I like it a lot. Grixis is one of the top decks that I wanted to build myself for a long time. But sometimes I didn't have the time or the resources to do it. And then again, there were other players in my environment that played Grixis already, so I didn't want to add another Grixis to my environment. So, but yeah, reviewing your list today for this interview really reminded me how great this deck is. So I'm really excited to see this deck in the top 8. So yeah, then let's talk a bit about the decks. So first, a general question. Can you tell me something about the matchups? Are there any particularly good ones or bad ones, or is it a 50-50 against everything deck?
The most matchups are about 50-50. So there's no matchup where I would say that's unwinnable. I mean, of course, that deck has bad matchups like mono red, mono black, mono white. These are all decks that are a little bit difficult to beat.
Really? I would have guessed that you just generate more value than mono red.
Yeah, but mono red plays Blood Moon, Price of Progress, which are very big problems for the deck.
Yeah, we will see that when we look at the mana base. I can guess why. All right. Are there any decks? So you mentioned some that are rather bad. Are there decks that you like to play against?
I really like to play against Reanimator, because Cling to Dust is a really good card, and also my own Reanimate.
Yeah, you have Reanimate. You just give them targets for your Reanimate. That's great. And any other deck?
The most tribal decks, if you say goblins, elves. Elves is a really good matchup. Yeah, something like that.
All right. So then talking about your deck list, I noticed, pleasantly surprised, that there are no Infinity and no 40k cards. And there was not a single card that I needed to look up. So by comparison, I just did the interview with a Rakdos player, and he had 2 cards in his list, which totally struck me as what is that? So, but in your list, everything looked pretty familiar. So are there just no cards from these recent random printings, or are you like me and simply boycott them?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, in Warhammer and in the Infinity set aren't really cards for Grixis Tempo. I mean, it's like 4 cards where I would say that are good. Stellar Pup, Chaos Defiler, and I don't know.
Morlock and
Morlock.
the green mana guy.
Yeah, and yeah, that are all cards
none of them
that are not. Yeah, except the Chaos Defiler, but it's a little bit clunky for 5 mana.
It's a 5-drop, so that's not Grixis Tempo. Right. Okay, so then let's begin with a walk through your deck. So I arranged the deck into the classical archetypes, and doing so, I realized that many cards cannot be clearly assigned to one category, because some of the cards do so much that they are both like threats and card draws and removals, so they fulfill multiple roles. So I would guess that this is a component that makes Grixis both a very fast and a very versatile deck. So let's look a bit at the threats, and most of the threats seem quite obvious. So if I would play a Tempo deck in Highlander or Modern or Legacy, most of these creatures would be in if they were my colors. But there are also some that I want to briefly talk about. The first, a relatively new card, Mercurial Spelldancer from what is it? All Will Be One, right? So that's must be a recent addition because it's a new card. So how did this perform?
To be honest, the Spelldancer performed better in the test sessions than in the tournament, but it already did a good job.
So how good is the baseline being a 2/1 unblockable guy for 2? Is that enough?
That is enough, especially in the time of the initiative.
Oh yeah,
that is a real big problem for the Tempo decks.
Is it? I mean, you have lots of creatures to reclaim the initiative usually, right?
Yeah, but that are all 21, I guess. And
it's not that many, but it's still more than several other archetypes which should have bigger problems with it.
Yeah, but if I don't take the initiative,
yeah, then they will run away with the game.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and how often does this spell copying happen?
In the test session, very often. In the tournament, I must say, Mercurial Spelldancer just pulled out the removal from my opponent's hands.
Which is also fair, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, then same questions about the Fairy Mastermind, and an even more recent printing from March of the Machine, which starts to really make waves. The price rises towards 20 euros or something. So there seem to be other formats discovering this card. So how did it perform for you?
I think it a little bit overperformed in the tournament. I mean, against Grixis Tempo and is it Tempo? It is a really good card. I played these 2 matchups in the tournament where it draws me several cards.
Yeah, because they have cantrips and you just react to a cantrip and draw a card yourself. That must be very...
I mean, if they play Brainstorm in my end step, I flash the Fairy Mastermind, I draw a card too.
Of course.
That's fair.
And I mean, it's quite a kind of vulnerable. So Grixis and Izzet would be kind of don't have many problems killing this. But when they kill this, when it has already drawn a card, because we responded to a cantrip, then it's probably has done a lot already. Did you activate the 4 mana ability ever?
Not in the tournament. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of giving my opponent cards without doing anything. I mean, I have to pay 4 mana. That's not...
Yeah, that's a lot for your deck, but still, I mean, there might be situations where you are in the late game, all players have run out of resources, and you just have this guy lying around and some lands. Would you activate it, or wouldn't you?
Sometimes, yes. It depends on the matchup. It depends who I play against.
So if you like the person or not. So Commander politics. Well, nah, you stink. You don't get a free card.
No, but although in general, I wouldn't activate the ability.
All right, so it's great for its passive already.
Yeah.
So one old card that we need to discuss. I have to do this in case Timmy is watching. So Delve of Secrets. You run less than 50% of instants and sorceries. I would guess it's like 35 or 40 something. How often does it flip, and how long does it take for it to flip? Is this still a good card, or is it just a 1 mana 1/1?
Most of the times it's a 1 mana 1/1, but it took 2 turns on average to flip with the Delver, and that was good enough for me. Especially when I play it on turn 1, then I'm happy to just counter, remove all the things from my opponent.
Yeah.
Then I have my little threat, and
it grows at some point, and then you're happy. Okay.
And then my opponent is sometimes forced to do something.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the Delver is a it always threatens to be more than a 1/1, so at some point it will eat the removal spell.
Yeah.
Okay, so all the other threats are kind of intuitive for me. Do you have anything to add on threats?
Yeah.
Any shoutouts?
I have. Yeah, the Terramanda was really underwhelming.
Oh, really? Are you eating up your graveyard stuff for the delve spells? Or...
Yeah, especially for Cling to Dust.
Oh, right, okay.
And I cutted the Terramanda yesterday for the Dark Confident. Or self-destruction.
Yeah, that's always great, always great. So you didn't run Dark Confident. Yeah, right, I only realized that now. Okay, interesting. Any other things that you were happy or unhappy with?
No. I would say all the threats did what they should do. Even the Fable. The Fable I wasn't really sure about to put in a tempo deck, since it's more mid-rangey.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, having mid-range stuff on top of the tempo curve, it generates a lot of value for just 3 mana. So I would guess that's just a fine card, because it's simply a good card by itself, and the opponent cannot allow for the token to remain or for the backside to remain.
Yeah.
And in between you get a double looting. So I mean, what's not to love about this?
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about counter spells. You'll run a lot of counter magic. I think I counted 15. And you have a focus on the cheap and nasty counters that as a tempo deck would do. And are you in general satisfied with the number of running 15 counter spells?
The
hesitation means that you're probably not.
Yeah, I'm not 100% satisfied with 15 counter spells.
Too few or too many?
Too many.
All right.
Sometimes you just have all the reactive spells and you can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And if your opponent just plays a land and pass the turn, that's horrible for you.
I mean, okay, so you would say that you would cut 1 or 2 counter spells to add more threats so that you have something to do?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh.
Which counter spells would you cut?
Lose focus on memory lapse.
All right. Yeah, that's would have been my guess as well. So when we're speaking about memory lapse, I was surprised to find memory lapse in this list. I mean, not really. It's a great tempo card, definitely. But I didn't see Remand, which I would also consider a great tempo card. So why did you choose to run memory lapse but not Remand?
My problem with Remand is that I can't protect my threat with it. Then they just
if they have enough mana
play Swords.
Okay, yeah. Right.
But if they play Swords to Plowshares, then I cast Remand. They just cast it again, and I'm very
right. Yeah, so Remand is more restrictive.
Unhappy.
All right. But still, you said it didn't perform that much, so that would be one of the cut candidates for more threats.
Yeah.
All right. Which do you have any threats in mind that you would add for when would you cut the counter spells?
Not now.
Okay. I mean, the swapping process would only make sense if you had reasonable things to add. But I have some suggestions there. We'll come to that later. Another card that I want to talk about is Stifle. It's a card that I love really a lot. But when I played decks that could run it, I always felt it was the 101st card. And it has been that for many years. And it was always like, yeah, I need to find a cut. And yeah, maybe it's Stifle. It doesn't do enough. And so how does it perform in a tempo deck like yours?
Stifle is one of the spells I wouldn't cut right now. It often gained really much tempo if I stifled a fetch land from my opponent or wasteland.
I mean,
wasteland is a very big problem.
that's the classic activation. I mean, Stifle is like stone land for 1 mana.
But sometimes you just have to stifle an effect from your opponent. Something like Wild Plume Adventurer, if they want to get the initiative.
I mean, you don't have to worry about that anymore. It's banned by tomorrow. But
yeah, but
there are other initiative guys.
Yeah.
Maybe even for a tempo place, you could stifle 1 Minsk and boot trigger or something, so that you have one turn chill and no hamster flying around. Right. Let's look at the removal shell that you run. I counted 15 removal. That's the 14 in my category, and drawn in the log, which I put 2 counters, but which you could put in any category. So are you, same question as for counters, are you happy with that number?
Yeah, of course, 15 is enough. I think you don't need more. Since you're already interacting with your opponent with counter spells, hand disruption, and less is a little bit difficult if you can't handle the threats from your opponent anymore.
And I mean, some of the removals also can go to the face. After all, you will kill your opponent by combat or other damage, and I mean, some of them you can just throw into the face. All right. Regarding choice of removal, you seem to be running all the cheap removal spells that you can get your hands on, plus some more clunky but versatile ones. So I think I have never played Flame Slash in any of my decks for its lack of ability to combat planeswalkers or the face. So how does this card, 1 mana, 4 damage to a creature sorcery, how does this perform?
I mean, I have to say Flame Slash was a card I haven't played from the beginning. Since I played Grixis, I mean, I played Grixis since 2020.
So when you started to play Highlander?
Yeah.
I remember that.
but sometimes the threats from your opponent outclass your lightning bolts, chain lightnings, and then a flame slash is often better. I mean, threats like Questing Beast, the Minsk and Boo token, that are really big problems.
Yeah, I can imagine. Not only imagine, I have experienced that. Well, then killing the hamster with a flame slash also, it doesn't feel like solving the entire problem.
Yeah, but if you can kill the Minsk and Boo, then it's okay.
Of course. Right. So another small burn spell, Unholy Heat, seems like a great choice because it does some things that Flame Slash doesn't, which means it can kill planeswalkers. And of course it only gets really good when you have Delirium to deal 6 damage. So how does this interact with your Delve spells? Do you sometimes have the feeling that you kill your own Delirium because you have to put a Delve threat on the board?
I think Delirium is very easy to enable with this deck, especially with False Scour, Mental Note, Dragon Rage Channeler.
And I mean, you have enough of the 4 big types like Instant Sorcery, Creature, Land, so it's not very difficult to get those into the graveyard.
And I mean, 3 artifacts, I think. Baleful Strix, Bomart Courier, and
Bauble.
the Mishra's Bauble. Yeah. I mean, if Unholy Heats just do 2 damage, it's fine for me, mostly 2. I mean, it's a 1 mana removal where I can kill a mana elf with. That's really important for me.
Yeah, I can see that. Alright, so that Delirium side is easy to achieve, but mostly a bonus.
Yeah.
Alright, another relatively new card, also from All Will Be One, is Sheodred's Edict. Is it as good as it looks? Like the Edict without the typical Edict flaws, namely that the opponent cannot have a token to protect a creature, and you can choose to have it sacrifice a planeswalker?
When I saw Sheodred's Edict in the spoiler, I was very euphoric. Because I was finally able to cut Dreadbore. I hate Dreadbore because it's sorcery speed.
Okay.
And to have an instant speed removal is so much better than the sorcery speed removal. Especially while Minsk and Boo is there.
Interesting comparison, by the way. The Rakdos player I just interviewed told me, poor Dreadbore, that he just recently cut Dreadbore to bring back an Edict effect. But he brought back Angrad's Rampage because he needs to kill artifacts. But yeah, still, so it's sad times for Dreadbore, I see that. So I further saw that your deck does some kind of bleeding, so removal spells, especially removal spells that cost you life, like Snuff Out or Dismember. Can this be a problem at times, or is it still good enough to pay 4 life to kill a threat which otherwise would deal more than 4 damage over time?
I think the most threats would really deal more than 4 damage, so I think it's okay to kill the threat for 4 life. Also, there are creatures that you don't want to lay around on the board. Especially something like Fiend Artisan.
Which you cannot snuff out. But you can dismember it.
Yeah, yeah. But there are some creatures that shouldn't lay around.
Yeah, there are many of them. I mean, so many good creatures with insane text have been printed, so it's beyond question that you need removal to handle stuff. Alright, speaking of bleeding, I didn't see Death Shadow or Scourge of the Skyclaves in your list. Didn't you test them? I have a vague recollection of you playing these things in your deck.
Yeah, you're right. I tested both of them in the past, but they were too situational cards. I would prefer Gurmek, Engler, and Tisigur if I had the choice.
That would be 2 threats that you can add instead of counterspells.
Yeah, but 2 more Delve creatures. Yeah.
I mean, how many Delve creatures do you run? Like, you have 2?
I have Murktide, Forager, and the Dig Through Time, and then Cling to Dust.
Cling to Dust, which escapes 4 cards in your graveyard. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, maybe and you wouldn't run both, but I mean, I would. Just a guts feeling, I would think that Gurmek Angler is fine. Tessica has other problems because it's only 4 power and it's a legend. But yeah, I would consider playing Gurmek over a counter maybe. But yeah, you're the expert. I'll leave the testing to you.
Yeah, and Death Shadow and the Skyclave creature both have the problem with Swords to Plowshares on Solitude. If they kill a creature with Swords to Plowshares or Solitude, mostly Death Shadow or Skyclave version.
That's a bad 2-for-1. Right. So the 2 clunky and versatile removal I found in your list are Fury and Kolaghan's Command. I know that Münster has a long tradition of hating Prismari Command and loving Kolaghan's Command. So what's your current state? Is Kolaghan's Command still good enough for 3 mana? I mean, the effects are all good, but is it a card that you would say has performed well and you will keep it in the deck or not? And if you want, you can comment on Prismari Command as well, but don't feel obliged to.
To be honest, Kolaghan's Command is a card I never considered to cut. It's my only way to kill an artifact. As long as we're running Urza Saga, I wouldn't even cut Kolaghan's Command.
Alright. I mean, you could add removals that also kill artifacts, like the Ragnaros player plays Abrade and Angrad's Rampage for this very reason.
Yeah.
Have you tested those?
I tested both of them, but I really don't like them. The Kolaghan's Command is a little bit like the Fable, a little bit more mid-rangey, and gives you a lot of value in the late game. Especially when your Murktide is in the graveyard and you can put it back into your hand. That's neck-breaking sometimes.
All right, and also you don't have many clunky removals, so 1 more clunky spell is probably fine.
Yeah.
Then the other card, the Fury, is becomes less clunky if you pitch for it, but then it costs cards. In the past, when I tested decks like this or Rakdos or something, I had sometimes trouble to compensate the card disadvantage of Fury or Force of Will, Force of Negation. So how does your deck do that?
With the Fury, I wouldn't say it's a 2-for-1.
I mean, of course, if you hit multiple ones, then it's a 2 for 3 maybe even, but still you're down. You're also down 1 card, so is that then fine if you kill some tiny creatures but lose 2 cards for that? I mean, of course it's important to do that, but then again you're also you might lack gas to come back on the board. So I felt always when I was behind on the board and played Fury for 2 cards, killing 2 or 3 creatures, that wouldn't help me a lot if I didn't have the cards in hand to build my own board again.
I never really had the problem with that card disadvantage with the Fury. I mean, Fury is the creature that I reanimated mostly.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you can reanimate it, which your deck can because you run reanimate, that's of course a huge advantage. Then that would be one way to come back, because if the second Fury, then that's basically the same effect like these ephemerate decks in Modern Duel, right? So you have to pay the full cost of 2 cards for the first instance, but you get a free second or third instance of the copy by flickering / reanimating.
And also, if you generate tempo with this play, your threats mostly do also some value. For example, Laelia, the Forager, that are cards that refill your hand out really quick.
Yeah, and also there are some card draw thingies that we will look at in a second. And a related question, have you tested Subtlety and Grief, so the other elemental incarnations in your colors?
To be honest, Grief is the card I haven't tested yet. But I think it's not really a card I would like to play in a tempo deck.
Yeah, so the Rakdos player said the same thing, so every mode is just too weak in Highlander. If you don't have these blink options like in Modern, then it's just...
Yeah.
It's bad for 4 mana, it's bad for 2 cards.
Yeah.
Because it cannot...
I mean, I didn't even generate tempo with it. Because my opponent haven't even...
So what about Subtlety? That is a card that can generate at least some tempo with its mystic, snaky, memory lapsey ability. You did test it, right? I have seen it in your deck.
In the past, I tested Subtlety a lot. I mean, it wasn't bad, but not really overwhelming. And the slots are really limited in this deck.
Of course.
So I had to cut Subtlety.
All right. So turning to the next category, that would be card draw and cantrips. That section does look kind of straightforward. Are you happy with the amount and the combination?
Yeah, I would say mostly. Except for 1 or 2 cards I'm not really happy with.
Which would be?
For example, Gush.
Oh.
I mean, I'm happy that I haven't drawn that card in the whole tournament.
Cool. Oh, that's a disappointing statement. I love to see Gush in there.
I just played it because I had the beautiful foil version.
That's a good reason. Yeah, that is taking away one of my future questions. Because I remember walking by your play table at the tournament and seeing you unable to cast Snuff Out because you had 2 duels on board, but none had any basic land types. So, and Gush for 5 mana is of course not an option. So yeah, I can see why you might not be happy with this card. Okay, so Gush out.
I mean, Gush is already cutted. I put in Tainted Indulgence.
The one from Capenna, right? Which is draw 2, discard 1. And maybe not discard if you have 5 different CCs in the graveyard.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a cool card. Another card, you said there were 2 cards that you were unhappy with. What's the other?
Yeah, sometimes Serum Visions wasn't really good. But not that bad as I would say. I would cut it right now.
I mean, you need these cantrips for your deck plan, right? You need to have the selection and fill your graveyard.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking about cantrips, what about Portent? Have you tried that card? It's the ponder that draws the card on the next turn.
I tested it for 2 months, but I think it's the worst cantrip I could run. Except
is the belated drawing so bad? Because I tended to like it more than Serum Visions, for example. But then again, it wasn't a tempo deck that I tested it in. It was more of a control deck that might seriously make the difference.
Yeah, I would say not to draw the card instantly is really, really bad for the tempo decks. Because you often have to interact in any kind with your opponent's cards.
Okay.
Especially with counterspells removal. Sometimes you need the removal and then
Yeah, in the
you
later
can
game
play
this
it
is a
well.
problem. I mean, but on
Yeah.
turn 1 it's a great cantrip because you don't mind when you draw the card. But yeah, I can see if you're digging for answers, then this is really problematic at times.
Yeah.
Alright, I wanted to ask you about Cling to Dust, but I think this is unnecessary because you have stated multiple times now how much you love this card and how important this is. So,
I would say Cling to Dust was the best card in my deck
oh
in the whole
wow,
tournament.
that's
I
a
mean,
statement.
it depended a little bit on the matchups. In 4 matchups, that card was really, really good.
Because it did what?
I played 2 times against Mono Red, and that's not the best matchup, as I mentioned before.
So you're saying that the life gain aspect was actually important, not the grave hate aspect?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It often generated me 12 life in a game.
So you are able to pay 4 mana for things after all.
If the game continues in such long games, yes.
Alright. That's cool. Great. So I was, I mean, I have the feeling that I have been in the Murphy's Law universe in Highlander for a long time, and my hand Cling to Dust was always just a very bad cantrip. But yeah, everybody else keeps telling me what great things this card does. So I'll probably test it again.
I mean, that's just the bottom line to say it's a bad cantrip.
Yeah, and I was never maybe above the bottom line, as it appears.
So Cling to Dust is a card you often tutor with Demonic or Tainted Pact, especially when you play against other graveyard-dependent decks, such like Reanimator, decks with Red and 6. Red and 6 is sometimes really also a problem. And in other tempo decks, it's...
Yeah, I think if you're saying, if you're describing how good a card is, whenever you say, I tutored for it multiple times in a tournament, then that's already the highest recommendation for a card. Okay, I'm convinced. I believe you. So let's look at the disruption section, which is rather small in your deck. You run the things that I would call the obvious 3, which is Thoughtseize, Inquisition of Kozilek, and Duress. Interestingly, I just when I talked to the Rakdos player, he told me that he didn't run Duress because he swapped Duress for Dread Fugue in all of his decks because of the prevalence of the creature decks, and Duress being a blank quite often for him, so he or a whiff rather, so only giving information but only seeing creatures and lands. How does Duress perform for you, and have you considered running Dread Fugue?
Duress performed as always, I would say.
Which is?
It always had targets in my opponent's hands. So it never blanked when I played it. And Dread Fugue, I tested it for 1 month, I think, but I really don't like that card.
Okay.
My problems are not cards that cost 2 or less, more like that cost 3 or more.
All right, so that's the probably the different approach from the Rakdos and the Grixis deck. So the Rakdos player said that he would probably re-add Duress, but he said that Dread Fugue also performed very well. So, and he also said that he considers Blackmail as a 5th disruption spell. Have you ever played or considered Blackmail?
I never tested it yet. I think the slots are not available right now for that.
If you had an old border foil version of that card, would you play it? I take that as a yes. Okay.
For 1 month.
Fair. So the last category I made up is the notorious misc category for things that didn't want to make a individual category for. So we could also call it recursion and tutoring. So you have mentioned already reanimate being a tutor target for Fury, for example, or reanimating opponents reanimate targets, which is great. And Snapcaster is also pretty obvious, a very strong card. So let's talk about the tutors instead. So is Demonic Tutor good enough in your deck? I realized, I mean, of course, Demonic Tutor is a great card, but I consider it a bit slow sometimes, and you're running not very many lands. So this feels, in the framework of your deck, feels like a bit like a very clunky card. So how does Demonic Tutor perform in your deck, and what do you use it for?
I often use it to search for the card I needed, and most it's a 1 mana card, so that's not that.
So you can play it immediately. So you mentioned that you tutored for Reanimate and for Cling to Dust already, so these are the 1 mana
Very
cards?
often, yes.
Okay, interesting.
So that, I mean, I usually don't tutor for a card that costs 3 or more, except in the late game. But in usual, it's a 1 mana card I'm tutoring. Sometimes the Murktide.
All right. So the other tutor, the Tainted Pact, does look more obvious to me because it's at instant speed, which sort of virtually lowers the costs. And do you use it for the same things that you use DT for, or what is Tainted Pact's job in your deck?
Yes. I really don't care about the exiled cards.
Unless they are not 100% of your deck.
Yeah.
So I saw you at the tournament digging for, I think it was Reanimate, and you exiled away like 60 cards or so.
Yeah.
I'm curious if his next fetch will hit any of the desired targets, but it did, I think.
And Tainted Pact is also a combo with Laelia.
Oh, right. Because
sometimes
Laelia
you can...
does a trigger on every individual card?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. That's strong. It's also a bit random, but it's strong when it happens.
Yeah.
That's basically Laelia is unblocked and you win the game because you just exile 20 cards and the opponent is dead.
Yeah, or if my opponent has 1 blocker, I attack with Laelia, I use my Tainted Pact for Snuff Out, for example, and then kill the blocker and win.
That's a cool playline. I didn't think about that. I think I have seen Laelia plus Tainted Pact on Magic Online Highlander testing back in the days, but yeah, I sort of forgot about that. That's really cool. And did you have to twist your mana base to make Tainted Pact work?
Not really. Also, I'm playing 30 lands. They are already stacked, and if I would play 31 lands, I consider Snow-Covered Island, Underground River, or Otawara.
All right. So that brings us to the last category, your mana base, which looks straightforward for a Grixis tempo deck with Tainted Pact. So are 30 lands enough? That seems a bit few.
Yeah, but since you play very much cantrips, it's not such a big problem.
How many one-landers do you keep? I wouldn't...
60%?
Wow, that's a lot, okay. Because I'm always a bit apprehensive to say I have Darkslick Shores and 2 cantrips in hand, and I start by Darkslick Shores cantrip, and the opponent starts with Wasteland to my Darkslick Shores. That would be totally devastating. So I'm always a bit shy to exposing myself to like Blood Moons or Wastelands. Oh, speaking of Blood Moons, how do you play? How do you fare against Blood Moons?
I think my deck is not really able to play around Blood Moon and Back to Basics. All I can do is let my opponent discard it with Duress, Inquisition, Thoughtseize, or counter it.
Right. I mean,
And
also,
if I can,
you can still play your red spells, which are not many, but still
yeah,
they exist.
Yeah, it's very limited. I mean, I run 15 red cards, I think.
Yeah, that's not a lot. So how greedily do you fetch for basic lanes? So to ensure that you have your one island and your one swamp available in case this happens?
I think I never fetched like this.
Okay.
I mean, if my opponent is able to resolve a Blood Moon or a Back to Basics, I just die.
Okay.
I can live with that. I'm a greedy player.
That's a fair point. And I do like the approach. I have always been known to be a very careful. I'd rather play my deck in a way that I have no auto losses, but maybe some more greed would do me good. So we're done with the deck. I'm still in love, even as I now learned that I have to play Cling to Dust. So are there any final thoughts from your side regarding the deck or deck card choices?
I already told you about the Gush and the Terramanda, which I really don't like. But
there is one thing that I just remember. I promised the Rakdos player to ask you about Opposition Agent, because he's a big fan of Opposition Agent, and I can totally see it in the Rakdos list. And I was wondering why you wouldn't be running it in the Grixis list. Is this card just not Grixis enough, or do you don't like it in general?
I would say it is Grixis enough, but the 3 drops are a big problem in the deck.
Okay.
Since I'm running 5 or 6 3 drops, I think, and too much is not good for this deck.
Okay.
I mean, Opposition Agent is a very good card, but 3 mana is a big invest for the deck.
Okay, I see. Right, so then let's take a quick look at your matchups that you played on the Continental Cup tournament. So as we have learned that you made top 8, but then unfortunately met the later champion Dirk and were eliminated. But that means still you have earned your top spot in the top 8. So what were the matchups? Do you remember the matchups from round 1 to 6 that got you there?
Yeah. Round 1 I played against Anton from Berlin, I think, who played medium red. And game 1 my opponent had slow fast mana, or how should I say it?
I don't get it. What did he have?
The tapped red land with 2 counters.
And the depletion lands. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then he was able to play Season Pyromancer and so on turn 2. That was too much for me.
Alright, so you lost the first round?
First game.
First game, okay.
Game 2, the Murktide Regent won for me. And game 3, the True Name Nemesis.
Alright, okay, interesting.
So my opponent wasn't able to get rid of the True Name.
I mean, okay, that is quite a task for mono red.
Yeah.
Regardless of being it medium or aggressive. Okay, so that's the 1-0. What's the second round?
In the second round, I played against Is It Tempo? I mean, I don't really remember that much from that match.
Okay, then do you remember the result?
Yeah, I won 2-1.
Alright, that's a 2-0 start then, and round 3?
I mean, I have to say, in the Is It Tempo matchup, there was the Fairy Mastermind that overperformed. very well. In round 3, I played against Golgari Lance.
Oh, interesting. One of the more exotic decks.
Yeah. Game 1 was very sad and interesting, I would say.
Sad and interesting. Please tell me more.
I was on the play. I was able to cast my Dreadhorde Arcanist on turn 2, and my opponent then wastelanded me several times. Yeah. And all.
So what was the interesting part? I only heard about the sad part.
Yeah, but I won that game.
Oh.
Because my Dreadhorde Arcanist flashbacked my Reanimate that was targeting his Questing Beast.
Oh, okay.
Which I killed with my one island with the Dismember.
Okay, well, that's a cool line. I see. Yeah, okay.
So, you see, it was sad and funny too.
I see. Right, that was in round 3. So you won that match as well?
No, that match was just a draw.
Oh, you went into timeout.
In the yeah.
Interesting.
I was one turn short for lethal.
Okay.
But
so then you're at 7 points after 3 rounds. So then round 4.
Round 4, I played against Grixis Tempo. Also,
a mirror.
Also the mirror match, right? And my opponent was too aggressive in the first game. Game 1, my opponent won. Game 2, I won because of minor decisions, such as like I have 2 mana. I don't play Dig Through Time because I want to play around Force Spike, Daze, Spell Pierce. And in game 3, my opponent stumbled on 2 mana, which were very painful because both were pain lands. So
that kind of helps. So that means that you won that match and had 10 points after 4 rounds?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And also that means that you weren't able to draw into the top 8 right now, so you had to play round 5 as well.
Yeah.
So what did you play against?
Round 5 was the matchup I hoped I don't see again at the tournament. It was mono red again.
Oh, okay.
But this time it was mono red aggro.
Mm-hmm.
And game 1 I won thanks to Cling to Dust. Nobody knows how.
By gaining 12 life, maybe?
Yeah. Game 2, my opponent was really fast. That I wasn't able to stabilize me.
Was your opponent the later top 8 player or another red player?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
So I'm not unhappy to lose to him, I have to say.
Okay, so you lost that round.
Yeah.
And were 10 points after 5 rounds, which means you had to win the last round, right?
Yeah.
Which you did. Against what?
Nico Felmer, my team partner.
Ah, right. So the mono black mid range.
Yeah, mono black control, I think. Control mid range. I don't know.
At least more. It will compared to his first brew, which was mono black aggro. It was mono black control, definitely. Yeah.
But in both games, my opponent doesn't stand a chance against me. I mean, I had all the cards that my opponent don't want to see, such like mana drain into Laelia. with counter backup.
Yeah, I just know that you mentioned. I remember passing by your table and seeing a look of desperation on Nico's face. All right, cool. So that's what you got. That was your road to the top 8, which is great.
Yeah.
And so now we are running a bit out of time, so I will ask you the questions that I asked the others in turbo mode. So basically, just give me your thoughts on the current format, on the current ban and watchlist situation, and about the event in general.
Yeah, I think the format is healthy right now, I would say. Especially, I don't like the Infinity cards, such as the Space Doggo.
Tell me about it.
The Warhammer cards, I think, are fine, such like Morlock, Chaos Defiler.
I mean, they do look a bit weird, but at least they don't involve rolling dice for...
they're not random.
They're not between doing nothing and winning the game. They are pretty straightforward.
Uro, I think, is not as strong as Oko. I would switch the roles of Uro and Oko.
Yeah, you're running into open doors, so that's exactly my opinion. But unfortunately, not in the position to change it. So, what's about the things that are to be banned and that are on the watch list?
I think White Plume Adventurer is correct to ban. I really don't like that card. Because it's a 3-mana card, especially when my opponent is on the play it turn 2. When it resolves, I'm not a good shape. I
think hardly anyone
often loses that games.
I think it's fine for initiative cards to be in the format, but it's they should cost 4 and more.
Yeah.
Because it's such a strong effect in dual mode, so... White Plume is a problem, I mean, I don't think that the format is terrible with it in, but I'm also not unhappy to see it go.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about the watch list things? Gifts, library, Oath, and Saga?
I think Oath, Other Saga, and True Name Nemesis are all fine, I would say. Oath of Druids is just a nice build-around card. I never saw that card overperformed so much that it's worthy to ban. Other Saga is just a nice low-value land. I think that's also fine. I mean, really strong it is just in really artifact-heavy decks, but they are not that
they're not that frequent.
Much.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's about the feeling that I have as well. Would you be happy to have gifts or library in the format?
Library, I'm not a big fan of that, because it's the money aspect, as some others mentioned before. And I mean, nobody has a library of Alexandria.
I mean, there are players, but it's not as easy. You can always borrow duels, as we saw at the Continental Cup, but borrowing a library, if you really needed it for your deck, would be kind of difficult, and that would be a sad thing.
Yeah. And Gifts Ungiven, I think... I don't know how it would push the combo decks. Combo decks is, in my opinion, a big problem in Highlander to build.
I mean, the ban list is shaped so that this is a problem, so that the games don't end at turn 4 or 5 by default, by just pressing the combo button. Yeah, but I also think, I mean, it's a strong tutor, but it's 4 mana, but it's also instant, and it does fill the graveyard. I can see unbanning Gifts Ungiven would probably be an argument for keeping Uro banned, because I think that card would be really strong
Yeah.
if you put it in the gifts package.
Yeah, but I think Uro would enable so much more archetypes than the gifts ungiven. I don't see really much dredge decks or something like that. Or Sultai midrange is gone.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Sultai since a very long time, I have to say.
Yeah, there also weren't that many Sultai lists in the tournament. I liked Sultai. Sultai was a great deck when Uro was legal, and I consider it far from broken. I still have the suspicion that there was some Vienna influence where it apparently won every Friday.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I think it is a victim of too small sample size. But there are many people who disagree and who are happy with the way it is. I don't know. We can change this, but we can at least.
Yeah, I mean, the council also argumented with that the answers for Oko would get any better, but I think for Uro it's the same argument.
Yeah.
I mean, every second card has graveyard hate.
Yeah, so. And also, I think it wouldn't have necessarily. We don't need to switch Uro and Oko. We can just unban Uro. I think if people want Oko to be around, I mean, just because they are both blue-green cards. I mean, it's not necessarily that we have to exchange them. So it's maybe not necessary to compare those. Okay, final thoughts on the event itself?
I really liked that event. The location was really good. I mean, it's just 1 hour.
Yeah, from Münster, it's very, very reachable. So
yeah.
So yeah, we'll have to evaluate if the location, outskirts of Bielefeld, is really a problem for people from other countries. If that's too hard to reach, we might have to reconsider, but we are also limited in cheap, available, large enough locations. So yeah, but I'm curious to see how that turns out in the future. I'd be happy to support an event in Bielefeld again, of course, but also I could also see that one might want a more internationally reachable occasion.
Yeah, but I would say the guys all were really nice. The most of them I already know, but some faces from Berlin, from Bayern, I think.
Yeah, there were people from, I think, Karlsruhe, Frankfurt, so people that I haven't met in person, or at least haven't met for a long time. So, and also some players I know from 15 years ago playing Legacy in Dülmen, so that was really cool to have those players around again.
Yeah, so it was really nice to meet them, to exchange some thoughts about the format, about anything, I would say.
Can I have some thoughts of Lukas' thoughtsies?
Lose to life. No!
Did do. I only brought one life. Next time I bring a cat. Okay, that's cool. But basically, that's everybody seems to be very happy about the event, the first after the pandemic. So it's motivating to do things like this again. Okay.
I mean, it's my first big Highlander event and made the top 8, so of course I'm happy.
This is I think I mentioned this before. It's a bit biased to ask top 8 players if they liked the event, because of course they did. So it's the easiest way to get positive feedback. All right, then we have reached the end of the broadcasting time. So thank you a lot for being here. And
thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to do some Grixis stuff in the future. So maybe I'll come visit you to play some mirrors.
Of course.
We'll see. See you.
See you.